Gracious God, unlock your mysteries to us that we may live out the life you have given us to live. In the name of Christ. Amen. Please be seated. It's almost like this year's readings, year B, are building on top of each other as if they were sort of a series, if you will. Anybody watch any Netflix TV shows? Good. So do I. I'm in season 2 of Wine on Earth right now, and it's really good. That's beside the point. The past couple months, my sermons have had a fairly common theme because the readings keep bringing up similar topics. We are part of a legacy that has come before us. We are called to be agents of Christ's healing in a world that is divided. We are called to challenge cultural norms that separate and divide us for the sake of reconciliation. And we are called to be a witness in the world. Now, putting that on the side burner here, I really enjoy the synergy between the readings today. Who here, like me, was caught by surprise that Jesus was not the first person to miraculously feed a multitude? Yeah. Who here grew up thinking that he was the only one who ever did that? It's fascinating how that works, isn't it? The interpretive lenses that we have understood Jesus through as a religion for thousands of years has been based on certain ways of looking at Jesus as though he were a one-off, unique individual that had somehow brought a completely new thing into the Jewish tradition. That's not actually really true, and that's not actually what the gospel is trying to point out. The 3 categories of the anointed ones that people were looking for, the Christ, the Messiah, if you will, were prophet, priest, and king. So what does it mean that Jesus is following in the footsteps of Elisha, or Elijah's protege, in feeding people in the field? So he's in line with that prophet. Who else went up to a mountain? Moses, right. So what's the difference between Moses and Jesus in this story?
Jesus wanted to feed everybody with food, and Moses wanted to feed everybody with God's commandments.
Brilliant. And, oh yes, Jesus wanted to feed people with food. Moses wanted to feed people with God's commandments. Now what's interesting is that, yes, Jesus brought food and commandments into the mix. So Jesus is sort of Moses 2.0 in this story. Now the difference is, Moses went up on the mountain to receive instruction, to receive Torah. Jesus went up on the mountain to give instruction. So he took what Moses did and built on it. Now, I like the fact that John's gospel points out that it was right about the time for the annual temple pilgrimage and sacrifice. Now, who here has been here at Christmas Eve or Easter and has had trouble finding a seat? Now imagine if we are the only sacred place in all of Walnut Creek, and everybody who was part of Walnut Creek came here and brought livestock. That'd be a bit of a headache, wouldn't it? But that's the significance of the Passover feast for the Jewish people. This was a pilgrimage they made once a year to Jerusalem. So I'm really glad that I wasn't one of the priests that had to deal with that sort of hassle, because it's hard enough during our high holidays without animal sacrifice in the mix. Jesus is recorded going to the temple with his family to sacrifice. In Luke's gospel, how old was Jesus when his family lost him like in Home Alone? 12. Interesting thing. How many baskets did they fill up after Jesus fed the people in the story? 12. How many disciples did Jesus have? How many tribes of Israel are there? You noticing patterns here? The Gospels are more than just a biographical story. They are a mythic, multi-layered significance that point to us the continuity of everyone in the story of God's people. While Jesus gave us the covenant in which we find connection to the God of Israel, he was also in the continuity, in the lines, in the faithfulness of the prophets of old. And we, following Jesus, are also in that line of the prophets of old and the message of feeding people. So we come here each week to be fed at the table of Christ. We go out after that. What does the post-communion prayer tell us to do? Go in peace to love and serve the Lord is the dismissal. But the post-communion prayer does say go out. It's thanks for feeding us. Now let us go out and feed the world. There's a rich significance in every little piece that we do at church. Now, I've been sort of harping on the importance of going out into the world. Note that Jesus didn't go to the temple this year. He went where? The hillside. He didn't go to the sacred place, or he didn't go to the constructed church, if you will. He went out into the community. One of the things that I enjoyed when I first started here at St. Paul's, which was a little unconventional, is that Reverend Sylvia would have me once a month, instead of coming to the service, to go to the farmer's market and try to schmooze and get to know people. It was a little awkward being by myself in my collar, but I got to know some of the vendors. I got to know a few of the people here and there. Of course, they were there to buy food, not really to have a religious discussion, and that's okay. Being present is important. Now, you probably noticed that my voice is a little hoarse this morning. That's because my cover band played a concert on Thursday night down the street at Dan's. And what's really fun is after I get off stage and people start talking to me and they find out what I do for a living, it makes for interesting conversations. And that's what Jesus did. He didn't just stay in the safe, comfortable places of familiarity of his own group. Did he go there? Absolutely. Even Jesus went up in the mountain to the wilderness by himself at times to pray. If the one we consider God has to pray by himself, that means finding comfort, finding solace, finding nourishment is necessary in our journey. But he also went out to the people. In this story, to feed the people, he didn't go to the temple to do it. He didn't bring animals or barley. By the way, what grain is in common with both stories today? Barley. Did you know that barley was a grain that was used for temple sacrifice? I didn't either. So Jesus brought what was normally given to the temple. Now keep in mind, when sacrifices were made in the temple, they weren't just burned. That was food for the priests, food for other people. The legacy of our sacrifice, feeding one another, is built into our story. That is the thrust of who we are. But in order to meet the people who were seeking what Jesus was giving, the healing that he was giving, the nourishment, he went out to them. We live in a time and in a place, as I've said before, where most of the outside world has no interest in what we have to offer because they don't know what it is that we offer. I had many conversations at camp with people who were unchurched about their reticence to go to church because they're afraid they have to believe a specific set of restrictive ideas and not be part of the community. But camp is, over 50 years, has been giving people sacred community, whether it was officially church or not. And that is part of what it means to be St. Paul's beloved community. So while we here must come, be nourished, be fed, be comforted, be encouraged, we must also go out into the world. Now, y'all do a heck of a job in going out into the world and serving others. That is part of what God has called us to do. Just as we are fed and Jesus feeds us, we should also feed others. The problem is, we can feed people all day long and give them nourishment. But if we don't build the relationships with them, if we don't have conversations with them, if we don't share our story with them and become connected with them, there's not much of a reciprocity there. There's not much of a sense of, hey, I can actually come to your church because it's a safe place for me. I can come to your church because it's about being in relationship with God and other people, not about whether or not you believe this little nugget over here, that little nugget over there. It's not the history of the horrors that have been committed in the name of Jesus. It's following Jesus and the very fact that our two symbols, the table is where we're nourished. The cross is the cost of what it means to love and be reconciled. But the cross is never the last answer. Even though Jesus was executed for treason because he stood up for love, he is present here today with us. What we need to do is share the open-ended, unique story that Jesus gives us that isn't the only one that teaches God's love, but it is the one to which we are committed. We can no longer just open the doors and hope that people will come inside. We are in a culture now where people are desperately hungry for love and connection and community. They're not looking for ideology. They're looking for love. We have that. And what I hope is that we find that balance between making sure that we get nourished. Because many of you do so much around here. I know you've been burnt out at times. And I've been burnt out at times. Last week I was burnt out because I didn't do enough to take care of nourishing myself. You need to do the same thing. And we need to make sure that people know that that's the case. Now, I know you all are people who share your stories with others. And I want to just reiterate the importance of what we have in terms of our calling, which is beyond just the incredible things like Trinity Center, the Valentine tea, the rummage sale, the homeless shelter meals. Those are part of it. But when was the last time we had a conversation about our faith with someone that wasn't already here? When was the last time we shared a meal with someone that wasn't already here? You have such good news here. And what Jesus points to today in his pain in the neck way of not following the structures that he was supposed to follow, he nudges us. We should come to the temple, and we should go to the mountain. We should go to the marketplace. We should go to the sea. We should go where the people are that are hungering for what we have to offer. So this week, and moving forward, especially as next week, we get to welcome Reverend Krista on our first Sunday. We are called to really get ourselves out into the world, build those connections, invite people to church, share your story of why Christ is meaningful to you. Help them understand that dogmatism is not the basis of who our community is. It is the love of Christ. May each and every one of us be nourished in that and inspired to share that love. Amen.